Nautilus Group, and he thought that that was the first major force in American art. And he liked to think that he was in some way an heir to that tradition. Jimmy was supported by so many different people over the years, but one of his greatest supporters was the State Bank of Southern Utah. I know he knew a lot of the people that worked for the bank. He probably grew up with them, but they gave him shows, they lent him money, they bought his paintings, and if you ever go into the Cedar City branch, they have some of his most magnificent paintings are there. It's amazing to me, and I'm just seconding what Reese said here, is that Jimmy kept getting better and better as an artist, and that at the end of his life, he was painting his best art. And I don't think many artists do that. Most of them do it somewhat earlier in careers, and I thought that was just so unusual that Jimmy would do that. And then just some personal things that happened with me and Jim. I actually met him when I first came here in 1980. I was at a party and someone introduced me and said, "This is Jimmy Jones and he's a really great artist." But what I remember about first meeting him was just, this was a really nice guy who was, as always, interested in what I was doing. When I finally got around to doing the article on him a couple of years later, I asked him, I said, "Okay, how do you want to do this? Are you okay with me using a tape recorder?" He said, "Yes." He said, "But the way I want to do it is I want to drive around in my pickup truck. So I'll talk about anything, but let's get in the pickup truck. You can turn on the tape recorder and let's drive." And so we did. We drove and drove and drove and did this many different times. And all those tapes now are in the special collections of SUU libraries. So if you want to listen to them, they've got the sound of the truck there, so you have to kind of listen. But those tapes are available for people to listen to. After we did the article, Jimmy would often stop by my office when he'd come up to see his mom, and we'd have coffee, and we did that for a number of years. The thing that I remember most about Jim, though, is the way that he liked to laugh. Jimmy had one of the most infectious laughs of anyone I'd ever met, and I think I had a way of making him laugh. I would just come up with these absurd things, and he would just laugh, and he would roll his head back, and just, he would almost lose his breath, and tears would come to his eyes, and he couldn't talk, and that's just one of the best memories I have of Jim. He just loved to laugh, and it was just so uninhibited. The last thing that I want to talk about is something I touched on at the beginning, is just the way that Jim had a way of turning the conversation away from him to you. And it reminds me of what the Russian playwright Maxim Gorky said about the great short story and playwright Chekhov. He said, "In Anton Chekhov's presence, everyone felt an unconscious desire to be simpler, more truthful, more himself." And you know, when people talk about self-absorbed artists, I say, Jimmy Jones. He was our local Chekhov. And if you were in Jim's company, he made you want to be a better person. Simpler, more truthful, more himself. Thank you. By the way, afterwards, if people have questions they want to ask me or Reese or John, we'll be here.
Also, they would be glad to sign the book, which accompanies the exhibit, and it also has the DVD, which is in a player downstairs, if anyone would like to listen to that after the program, or if you get the book. So they're all available to do that after our conversation. We also want to get a picture of Paula and some of the others after the conversation. All posterity. Okay. Our final speaker is a professor and the current chair in the communication department at Southern Utah University in Cedar City. He began full-time teaching at SUU in 1989 after working as a television news photographer and editor for KSL Television in Salt Lake City and Bonneville International Corporation in Washington, D.C. He has videotaped and produced educational, promotional, and documentary pieces in East Germany, Mexico, and Utah. In 2004, he was a Fulbright Scholar in Portugal, teaching video production at the Catholic University in Porto. He has produced multiple video projects related to public lands in the southwestern United States, including the award-winning documentaries as part of his scholarly and creative activities at SUU. In addition to Jimmy Jones, Red Rock Painter, his recent works include an hour-long feature on world champion saddle rider Cody Wright, and also a documentary on the unique sport of canyoneering. May I present John Smith.
I think my contribution tonight is to kind of wrap this all up and kind of bring it to the current timetable. I met Jimmy Jones. Jimmy introduced me to him after Jimmy came to my office and said, now's the time to do a documentary about Jimmy. And I had heard a few things about Jimmy, but I didn't know much about him at the time. And I think over the years, as in my position at the university, I get offers probably on a weekly basis for great projects to do. Or isn't there something that one of your students wants to do, meaning most often these are people that don't have any money but they want a video production done. And they come and ask for some student help. But I think I early on saw the absolute need for a documentary on Jimmy Jones. At the time, when Jim came to my office, we did not know that if we could fast forward 2 years, we might have approached it in an entirely different manner. But one of the first images I saw as a video photographer is because of Jimmy's time on the North Rim, I thought, okay, we have to go back to the North Rim. We're going to snowmobile or snowcat into the North Rim. I spent several days trying to make arrangements to line up snowcats getting into the North Rim, not knowing at the time that Jimmy, at that time, would not have come with me. If you watch the DVD, you'll see a brief section of him driving through Zion National Park in his little pickup truck, and a few segments of him walking there in Zion National Park. My intent was to kind of do a walking interview with Jimmy, and so I lined up, we went through the gate, my Toyota 4Runner has a sunroof, so I stuck the camera out and videotaped Jim driving through the park, and I was in the truck with Jimmy driving around. And then we got out at this location, Temple Sinwaba, and we were going to walk down the path. And we started taking a few steps, and I was videotaping him, asking him questions, and he took a couple of steps and took a deep breath and said, I can't do this. He was so short of breath, just walking and speaking. And then we began to notice that his health was going downhill fairly quickly. And this is the same time that, as Reese described, he was gearing up to paint these wonderful last few paintings. And as a video producer, I guess we could have taken the approach of let's document a dying artist in the last year of his life. And that's one story that we could have told. But it wasn't the story that neither Jimmy nor I wanted to tell. We wanted to tell the life of Jim Jones. And originally set out to produce an hour-long documentary. There's plenty of material. I mean, you can tell from the stories and anecdotes that we've heard that there's plenty of material to do a full hour-long documentary. And I was going to get some narrator to help tell the story. But when I realized that this was going to be part of a show, and as it's seen as part of the installation in this exhibit, I realized, no, I want Jimmy's voice to be the dominant voice in this documentary. And so he became the voice in the documentary, and that's why I returned to his home multiple times and just sat there and recorded interviews with him as he was painting these paintings. And I can identify several of these paintings that were on this easel as I videotaped him dabbing his paints on his plate, doing these paintings. This piece here was, I think, lying sideways in the back of his studio on my earliest visit. He probably had some final touches to do on it before he delivered it to the university. So I began to notice a decline in his health, but I was able to document some wonderful, wonderful segments. And one of the things in the book, and all of these pictures are actually still frames from the high definition video that we did in the documentary. As a photographer myself, it's a great opportunity when you have wonderful material to work with. And so, as we were producing this documentary, not only do we have a wonderful person who is very articulate and can tell his story, but we have these fantastic images that we can show at the same time while he's talking about his work. And so we knew that there would be a good blending of images and voice to tell Jimmy's story. A couple of well, I guess I consider myself a video editor, so I like to chop things up and slap things together. But one of the very important parts of the video documentary that was telling for me, and if you read the statement just to the left of that large Grand Canyon piece, it talks about how the Grand Canyon is his odyssey. And as I was videotaping Jim there, I was to the side of him, and he was talking and painting at the same time. And he just started talking about the Grand Canyon. And I started there, and then I stepped back and moved back over his shoulder to watch him talk about that. And he just kept talking about it. And he talked about the layers. And he identified every single layer in the Grand Canyon. You know, he's a geologist as well. And he understood those layers and knew their unique characteristics. And he kept talking, and I kept rolling the videotape. And then I moved back around, and he kept talking about how wonderful lighting streaks across the canyon, and the fractures identify, or at least indicate some wonderful compositional elements. And then he kind of sits back and says, it's hard to make a bad painting of the Grand Canyon because it's just all so beautiful. And I don't know many artists that really, it was revealing to me because he was looking at his piece, talking about how beautiful the Grand Canyon was. And I sense he was talking about his artwork as well, how beautiful that artwork was. And so as a video editor, I'm tempted to chop that piece up. But in the documentary, we chose to just let that whole segment flow. It goes on for a minute or two, where he's just really sharing some insights about his artwork. And so that was a special moment for that. If you watch the documentary very, very carefully, you'll notice that some of the segments, the video camera is further back, and it's at an angle to his back, or the canvas is hiding his face a little bit. If you had visited with Jimmy near the end of his life, he had a very long oxygen tube that he would walk all throughout his home. And that oxygen tube, early on, he took it off for several of the interviews. But the later interviews, I guess he just kind of gave up and just left the oxygen tube on. And so I was able to use the audio, but if you watch carefully, there's a few shots where you can see the oxygen tube a little bit. But that indicated that it's kind of a